Pakistan, Afghanistan, and maybe Japan. And he certainly didn't die on a cross and none of these things. I don't want to go into this too much and shock people, but I think what's important is people need to have a very open mind and relearn everything. What my work is about mainly is about deconditioning your mind. We grow up conditioned from childhood with either religion or science or schools or parents or ideas that are totally unquestioned, and that we just carry around for hundreds of years having no clue about what we're talking about. So it's very important that people today, as we're entering the fascinating changes, earth changes, cosmological changes, as we're going through really unique things, we need to also mentally and spiritually, forgive the term, grow up. And this growing up begins with deconditioning inside everything we felt we knew, because we don't know. So the Jesus story, to come back to your question, and the lines and all these stories about the bloodlines, it isn't really important so much what bloodlines we were from. We're all extraterrestrial. In one form or another, we're all from somewhere else.
Yes, absolutely.
And we mixed in some forms. Yes, go ahead.
So you are also working towards what you might term the merging of the dimensions.
Yes.
Where you're being able to see through the different dimensions and connecting them.
Yes.
All people are having this sort of transition happen.
Yes, this is coming now more and more. It began a few years ago. I don't know what it has to do with. The scientists I talk to, we're not so sure. What we know, when we have great stillness, like we have here, a moment where things come together, one can probably feel that there is a sort of a merging of light going on. Everything is after all light and energy, and where we may even hear, not voices, but we feel input. It's hard to peg, it's hard to explain. These things are becoming more and more discernible, where you can feel it, hear it at night in dreams, or even see it. Like sideways, you can maybe feel at times a presence. These transitions are going to become, if you had a graph, just much more steep over the next 6-7 years. I would estimate that somewhere around 2011, 14, 17, in that decade, within the next, say, 10-12 years, it becomes a prevalent or predominant reality, where this three-dimensional reality or world may even become less important than this other reality that bleeds in. I think every person knows what I'm talking about deep down, who sees us talking. I think everyone has his or her own experience and would word it in different ways. All I know is it's on its way. It began quite a number of years ago, and it's becoming stronger.
And you talk about earth changes, is that right,
yes.
in your book?
Yes.
And you're tapping into these both astrologically, scientifically from something of your contacts, and then what you're talking about in terms of what else? A certain psychic intuition about when they might occur?
Yes, okay. I use the term earth changes because that's the word everyone has agreed to call it. But I say, first of all, what's happening outside in the real reality is going to be less important. Let me make this really clear. In my book, it's very clear. What is the 3D, the physical world, politics, society, economics, quakes, weather changes, all that, that's what I call the outside world. That is less important than the inside world. What I talk about more in my book is about what we from inside ought to be doing about what's going to happen outside. But I say we shouldn't react to the outside event. We should from inside, at least, one shouldn't say should, but we want to be able from inside to grow into this and be ready to meet it sort of head on without any fear, because there's nothing to fear. It's going to be actually fun, in my opinion anyway. It's going to be very interesting. We're going to meet a whole new science, the awakening of a new geometry, of new mathematics. So there is exciting stuff that is going to happen that is so much more interesting than, what does it matter? There will be quakes, tsunamis, there will be certain years when there are climactic changes, a slight changing of the poles, probably, changes of the Gulf Stream, and so on. Those are the physical changes. I estimate they are somewhere between 2009 and 2020, more or less, that decade. you can't really peg it to one event. There are going to be several events. I think one in 2009, another one in 2011. I said in my book, I can repeat it quickly, that there's a young boy in Russia called Boriska. He's known as the little boy from Mars. And he says that in 2009 and 2011, according to his memory from Mars, as strange as this sounds, he remembers very well his life and the pre-recorded idea or message he has. And this is a small kid, 7 years old, that talks in Moscow, in the area around Moscow. Never mind, he also says 2009, 2011 are key years, numbers that he remembers. But he's not sure of what it is in the physical world, whether it's a quake or what nature the event is. But he speaks of a rather large calamity for one continent. Mm-hmm. Again, like I said, I don't think the physical events, the outside world, is what we should focus on. I want people more to focus within, because we are the change, and the change comes from within. So if, say, a handful of people worldwide really live with this change inside and grow strong to be surrounded by the invisible world and work with it, then everything that's going to happen outside will not be important.
That's a wonderful
That's my
way
opinion.
to put it. Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely excellent. So can you talk a little bit about what you're sort of aiming to do in this world, though, to sort of put people mm-hmm. into safe places and encourage them to build small enclaves of groups?
Yes, what I suggest, I've been suggesting it for a number of years, first in private, then on the internet, and now in my book. There is a couple of chapters devoted to this where I go into detail. To sum it up very briefly, we have to see that in the outside world there's going to be weather changes and a number of physical things changing, from society to climate to you name it, that boils down to the fact that society as such, the functioning of what we call our world, will pretty much disintegrate, if not break down, at some point. Mm-hmm. That's not dramatic. That's not something to get fearful about or have funny feelings of. All we need to know is we need to live what I call a life that is based on earth sharing or sharing with nature, which means we need to move away, at least those of us who want to live comfortably and normally and productively. I feel we need to move away from cities or from civilizations, and we need to live according to shamanic science. In early 2006, maybe you remember, there was this little whale, the bottlenose whale, that swam into the Thames River and died there. To me, he was the sign that the further away you're from humanity, the better. It sounds a little horrible to say that, but I think that the solution of what I call safe places or enclaves or safe havens or areas of building a new life have to be earthbound, and you want to be able to fish, to have animals around you, to be completely independent of what goes on around in society. In other words, you're going to live like tribes. And still, you will be able to apply high technology, to have free energy. So my idea is to have a network, not just one or two, a network, a chain of so-called safe places where people live according to ancient ways of life, but in connection with cosmology, have a group of people that each should have at least a few scientists, a few farmers, a few technically skilled people, basically groups that live in a what I call a group mind, with these ideas we're talking about, able to simply carry on life and live a life without the ideas that we carried into this life. In other words, who can decondition themselves and begin again. It's a little difficult to summarize all this. Those are big subjects.
That's okay.